Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today we are talking about Lenovo Legion Go, and there's been like tons of movies about it, videos about it, so I'm not gonna do like all the things that other YouTubers already did, but today I want to tell you about the real life experience of using this thing, this tablet, this gaming console, and this computer and personal and then just PC as my daily driver. So how does it work as an video editing tool, photo editing tool, gaming console or gaming PC, and what is the overall experience in real life with this thing as your main computer. So if you're like me and you don't like to have too many devices, like you don't like to have a phone, a tablet, a gaming console, handheld console, and laptop and PC, then this thing can actually do it practically all. So first of all, we will take a look at how it performs or how it feels to use it as your laptop. So the screen is a little small for a laptop, but you can actually edit both videos and photos on this screen if you optimize your layout of the software you are using to use it on such a small screen. So you basically have to turn off every unnecessary menu that you would normally probably leave on your, I don't know, big 4K monitor like the one I'm plugging it to. But you can actually edit both photos and videos. Nothing, spectacular, nothing like super advanced, but you can edit photos and videos on the go. But the main thing you want to have is keyboard. Without keyboard, working with touch operation is just a pain. So you can plug in something like my Logitech keyboard, very compact, very small keyboard. You can also buy like way smaller and lighter keyboard for travel purposes, and you're good to go. I tried to use this thing as a mouse, because as you know, you can use it in this FPS mode, and you can use it as a mouse, and this is actually pretty cool solution if you didn't take your regular mouse. However, I find my Logitech mouse a little bit more comfortable, so I prefer to have it with me. But all in all, like this setup, if you want to edit a little bit as using it as a laptop outside, not using external monitors, like this is like, to me, way too much hassle. You have to have too many devices charged and so on. So if you want to do it, and you don't want to do it like for, I don't know, 6 hours in a row, but like 1-2 hours of editing somewhere in the cafe, that thing actually can do a lot of good stuff for you. Now the next thing is when you plug it into external monitor, and how does it perform in photo and video editing. So I was actually pretty surprised that this thing can perform pretty well, and editing photos is pretty smooth. The export times are not the best. I would expect maybe a little faster, but at the other hand, it's not bad. I usually don't export like, I don't know, thousands of photos in one row, so it's, I don't know, 20 photos, 15 photos, 10 photos. So for that purpose, this computer is completely enough, and as you can see, it works pretty smooth. I didn't have any VRAM problems, though I gotta say, and in the conclusion I will say that 16 gigs on this thing is the biggest drawback of that of that computer, but overall photo editing is smooth enough. The lack of NPU makes a little bit, like all this AI generated stuff a little bit slow, but I don't actually know if that depends on Adobe servers or it depends on a local NPU system. So let me know in the comments below if you know how to make, like AI generated processes a little faster, if it's possible, or if it's just dependent on Adobe server's speed. That I don't know, but there's no NPU, so like removing AI, like logo removal or object removal, takes a little bit of time. It's stable, it's okay, but has something to keep in mind. However, let's talk about video editing. And video editing on this thing was a surprise, in a good way, in a bad way. In a good way, that it is actually pretty smooth. I was surprised. So 4K, 30 frames per second, 10 beats, 422 from Sony a7 Mark IV is pretty easy to edit. There's something about DaVinci Resolve version 19, now version 20 is released, so maybe that's gonna be improved, but with version 19, studio version, there's something with color correction that in the first, I don't know, 20 seconds it works pretty slow. You have to wait for all the effects to take place, but then after this 20-30 seconds it starts to be smooth and everything works fine. So I don't know what it is, but it also happened to me on an Intel chip. The 155H, I believe. After all the updates, after software update, driver update, and all the updates, it started to work perfectly fine. So I don't know if it was my fault because I didn't update everything correctly, or there was something wrong with DaVinci Resolve and the cooperation with the software, but ultimately it works smooth. It's not the fastest experience, so there comes this limitation of 16 gigs of RAM. More RAM would give us a lot of more options, because when you put a lot of layers with 4K footage on top, maybe some slow motion, maybe some animations, some transitions, things can go a little slow, so you will have to restart the application and then it works good again, but that is a hassle. So not a perfect experience, but much better than I actually expected. Now, gaming. Gaming on this device is great because of this big screen, and people sometimes complain that it's a little heavy or a little uncomfortable, but I didn't find it to be the case. Maybe I'm just, not too picky, but to me, gaming experience on this thing is pretty cool, and I like the fact that, of course, you can hear the vents roaring when you're playing something more intensive, but at the other hand, it's not very loud, so the fans are okay, and the biggest drawback, like hardware-wise, is the quality of the speakers. Just use headphones, like either Bluetooth or wired headphones, but it's just a much better experience. Other than that, it's a very, very capable gaming machine. However, it is not perfect gaming machine, and here comes the thing. So this is Windows 11, so it can run DaVinci Resolve, it can run Photoshop, and this is a big advantage. But the big disadvantage of this kind of setup is that you will have to spend some time tweaking your games to work on this machine properly. So to give you an example, I will talk about two very intense games. One is the Indiana Jones, the new Indiana Jones game, and after, I don't know, like half an hour, I managed to run it very smoothly with good image quality, 30 frames per second, yes, but in case of that game, it really doesn't matter if you have more than 30 frames per second, because it's a very cinematic, epic experience. So that's just perfectly fine to me. But for example, I used, instead of AMD FSR, I used Intel XeSS that also supports other platforms that not other than Intel, and I found it to be the best, image quality, frame rate, stability ratio. And after tweaking the setup both in AMD Radeon software, Adrenalin software, and tweaking some settings in the game itself, and by the way, it's very nice to see a lot of settings being available for gamers in this game, so you can actually really adjust it to your need. A lot of people say you have to set 8 gigs of VRAM for that, so you have only 8 gigs of RAM left for the system, but I didn't find it to be the best settings. The maximum I would go would be 6, so you have still like this 10 gigs reserved for the system, and that worked perfectly fine with Indiana Jones. Now, when it comes to Jedi Survivor, that situation is a little more complicated, because like setting this game up is a nightmare. So you install the game, it will run, no problem. There were some issues, people couldn't go past the intro, but now it's solved with all the updates, both to the game and to the drivers. You can run it without any tweaking. So it runs and it looks pretty okay. Of course, you have to turn your settings to the lowest settings, and you have to turn on FSR to make it look smooth. But at low settings on this screen with FSR set to balance or even performance, it looks pretty okay. The problem is that when you go to some more intense parts of the game, despite the fact that you still, with all the improvements and enhancements turned on, you're still getting a very good frame rate. Like you can even go to 60 frames per second with settings that you can see on the screen right now. But the problem is that game crashes, and I did try to repair the files, because you have this option in EA software, so it would work for sometimes pretty okay, but then it would crash. So sometimes you are just before the save point and the game crashes, and when it happens to you like 5 times or 6 times, then you're just losing this joy of playing. So here's the key takeaway. I feel like this hardware is still very, 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 very limited for the high-end titles that are out there, and you can have a lot of fun with Indiana Jones, but then you're something unfortunate playing Jedi Survivor. I just feel that a little bit more RAM probably could solve the problem here, because I tried all the solutions, 4 gigs automatic 4 gigs, 6 gigs, 8 gigs. The stability issue was just there. I came back to PS5 version that is not flawless by any case, because this shows that this game is really not well optimized, because even PS5 struggles at some points, and you can see some frame drops. It was a fantastic time I had with Lenovo Legion Go. It was over a month. I've been using it as my main computer, so I tested it thoroughly. And there are little things I would like to mention in the very end, like sometimes one of the ports, for some reason, it disconnects my external hard drive when I work with my external hard drive, SSD hard drive, and sometimes it can be a little, irritating, because, for example, you lose connection to your files in your editing software. I basically disabled on this Lenovo Legion space on startup, because I believe it just unnecessarily takes some resources from your machine that is already limited on resources because of this RAM problem here. Not problem, but limitation. If there's a necessity to tweak something with, like power, I just use this button, and there's this like side menu that gives you, to me, enough settings to tweak it according to my needs. Overall, it's a great device. I'm looking for version 2 with a little bit more power, and specifically with 32 gigs of RAM that would solve a lot of problems of Lenovo Legion Go. In the meantime, I still think it's a great thing, and to have such a small and portable thing that you can use as your handheld console and as your main PC is something like that I would never think is possible before. And if you want to install more games and you have limited space, and we are not talking about super intense games, then you have this micro SD card port where I put my Angel Bird 126 gigs of storage, and I have smaller games stored there to save on the space on the hard drive. So 500 gigs of hard drive seemed enough for me. I hope you guys enjoyed my own personal view of Lenovo Legion Go. If you did, please leave thumbs up, comment below, subscribe, and I see you guys in the next one. Yeah.